It was one of those impossible meetings that only imagination, or perhaps the unconscious, could arrange. In a quiet Viennese office, surrounded by antique couches and the smell of old books, Sigmund Freud waited for his next patient, a man who had conquered stadiums instead of minds. He entered wearing a tailored suit, posture flawless, eyes sharp with the confidence of a man used to applause. Cristiano Ronaldo. Freud adjusted his glasses, intrigued. "So this," he murmured, "is a modern manifestation of the heroic ego." The room fell silent, except for the faint ticking of a clock. Freud, always the observer, saw in Cristiano not just an athlete, but a living case study, a man who had turned self-belief into religion. "Tell me, Mr. Ronaldo," Freud began, "do you play football for victory or for validation?" Cristiano smiled. It wasn't arrogance. Exactly. More the kind of smile that says, "I've been asked this before, but never like that. Doctor, I play to win. Always. Since I was a kid in Madeira, I wanted to be the best. Not one of the best. The best." Freud leaned back, noting the words. The ego ideal born early, fed by deprivation. "Tell me about this childhood desire. What created it?" Cristiano's expression softened for a moment, eyes flickering with memories. "Madeira was beautiful, but hard. My family didn't have much. I remember looking at the old TV and thinking, one day, they'll watch me. I wanted to make my mother proud. I wanted to escape." Freud's pen scratched the paper. "Escaping poverty through ambition, a form of sublimation. You took the pain of powerlessness and turned it into drive. Remarkable." Cristiano nodded slowly. "Pain can teach you, doctor. When I left home at 12, I cried every night, but every tear became fuel. I trained like my life depended on it, because it did." Freud smiled faintly. "Yes, the young man who channels his suffering into creation becomes an artist of his own destiny. You, my dear Cristiano, are an artist in cleats." Cristiano laughed lightly. "Never heard it like that before." Freud's eyes twinkled. "Of course not. Most people only see your goals. I see your ghosts." The room went quiet again. For the first time, the world's most self-assured athlete seemed thoughtful. "Ghosts, huh?" he said finally. "Maybe that's why I never stop. If I stop, they'll catch me." Freud folded his hands, intrigued. Then perhaps we should not fear the ghosts, but thank them. Without them, you might never have become Ronaldo." The scene faded into soft silence, the kind of silence that makes the audience lean in closer, wanting more. The next day, the conversation continued, as if neither man had slept. Freud was fascinated by how a simple boy from Portugal had turned hunger into identity. So, after Madeira came England, Freud said, lighting his pipe, "The land of fog and criticism. Tell me, how did the young ego survive there?" Cristiano leaned back, remembering the cold mornings and louder headlines. "England was brutal. I didn't speak the language. The weather was gray, and so were the faces. But when I touched the ball, the world had color again. That was my escape." Freud nodded slowly. "And when they mocked you, called you a show-off?" Cristiano chuckled. "At first, it hurt. They said I was too flashy, too proud. But I realized something. Criticism is just attention with bad manners." Freud laughed softly, that rare, academic laugh that says, "I respect your wit." "Fascinating," Freud said. "You turned rejection into reinforcement. You found power in being seen, even as a villain. The ego wounded yet triumphant." "Exactly," Cristiano said. "Every boo in the stadium was proof that I mattered. You don't boo the average guy. You boo the threat." Freud leaned forward, voice low. "And that is where you transcended the crowd. You learned that love and hate are twins, both born from fascination." Cristiano smirked. "So, doctor, are you saying the haters made me stronger?" "Yes," Freud replied. "You metabolized envy. Most men drown in it. You drink it like wine." Cristiano grinned. Maybe that's why I celebrate the way I do. Ah, the famous gesture. Freud exclaimed, mimicking the see-you. Motion, a ritual of ego affirmation. Primitive yet poetic. The crowd gives energy. You return it amplified. The narrator observes that, for a brief moment, the two men laughed. The father of psychoanalysis and the king of football, united by the absurdity of human pride. But beneath the laughter, there was something deeper. Freud had begun to see in Cristiano not mere arrogance, but a man forever in dialogue with his own reflection, a gladiator of identity. Tell me, Freud said finally, what did you learn in England? Cristiano paused. His tone softened. That talent is nothing without obsession. That you can be great if you're afraid to be hated. And that the boy from Madeira was gone, replaced by someone the world invented. Freud exhaled. Then we must meet that invention. The world calls him. CR7. The fire in the study crackled. The narrator closes the scene with a whisper. Little did Freud know, the next chapter of their dialogue would unfold in the grandest theater of all, Madrid. By the time they met again, something had changed. The man who entered Freud's office no longer carried just the name Cristiano Ronaldo. He carried a brand, a legend, and echoes shouted in stadiums across the world. CR7. Freud noticed it immediately. The way Ronaldo stood taller, the polished certainty in his movements, the aura of someone who had turned admiration into armor. Doctor, Ronaldo began, smiling. I think I understand what you said last time about pain and ambition. In England, I learned how to control both. Control, Freud repeated, an illusion we all chase. But tell me, Cristiano, have you truly mastered it, or merely dressed it in perfection? Cristiano laughed lightly. Maybe both. I realize people don't just want goals. They want the image of greatness. So I gave it to them. You created a symbol, Freud said. The idealized self, stronger, faster, untouchable. You built an idol out of your reflection. Ronaldo leaned forward, and the world believed in it. Suddenly, I wasn't just playing football, I was performing destiny. The narrator's voice cuts through softly. Freud watched, fascinated, as the athlete spoke like a philosopher. Beneath every gesture, there was meaning. Beneath every victory, a subtle confession. The CR7, Freud asked, does he still feel fear? Cristiano paused. His eyes flickered, just for a moment. Only one. The fear of becoming ordinary. Freud smiled knowingly. Ah, the fear of mortality, of fading into crowd. My patients fear death. You fear invisibility. Ronaldo nodded. Maybe that's what keeps me going. Every match feels like proof I still exist. You live inside the gaze of millions, Freud murmured. The world watches, and in their eyes, you find your identity. It's both your mirror and your prison. Cristiano tilted his head. So you're saying I'm trapped by admiration? Perhaps, Freud said gently. Every applause feeds the ego, but also binds it. You become what others desire, not what you are. Ronaldo thought for a moment, then smiled slyly. If that's true, doctor, I hope the world keeps desiring greatness. Freud couldn't help but chuckle. Your honesty is refreshing, my boy. You do not hide your ego, you sculpt it. The narrator observes. Freud, who had spent decades studying men tortured by repression, now sat before one who had made peace with pride. It was almost therapeutic. Tell me, Cristiano, Freud said, leaning forward, when the crowd screams your name, who do they celebrate? The boy from Madeira or the god you became? Ronaldo's answer was quiet. Both. One created the other, and neither can survive alone. Freud's eyes softened. He had heard confession disguised as philosophy before. Then, perhaps, he said, your greatness is not arrogance, but reconciliation. The firelight flickered across the room, reflecting in Ronaldo's eyes like stadium lights in miniature. For a brief second, Freud saw not a patient, but a mirror, a man defined by the same hunger that once drove him to decode the human soul. Days passed, and Freud continued his observations. The world outside didn't know that inside those walls, two icons, one of the mind, one of the body, were dissecting the very nature of success. Freud began with a quiet tone. "Cristiano, may I ask, do you ever tire being perfect?" Ronaldo smirked. "Doctor, perfection is a game I can't lose. If I stop chasing it, I lose myself." Freud raised an eyebrow. The perfectionist paradox, the pursuit that imprisons. Tell me, when you fail, what do you feel?" Cristiano hesitated. Anger, shame, but also hunger. Every loss feels like betrayal, by the universe, by fate. Freud nodded. "You turn pain into momentum again. Classic sublimation. But beware, my friend, even the strongest ego needs rest. The body may recover, the psyche rarely does." Ronaldo leaned back. "Rest is for those who have enough. I'm still proving something." "To whom?" Freud asked softly. "To myself," Ronaldo replied. Then, after a pause, "And to them, the ones who never believed." Freud smiled faintly. Revenge disguised as motivation, another ancient human instinct. You are, after all, still that boy from Madeira, whispering to the stars that one day they'll remember your name. Cristiano chuckled. "They do now." The narrator's voice returns. The room filled with laughter, but Freud's eyes carried thought. He saw that every laugh, every flex of confidence, was a layer, armor over the boy who once felt unseen. "Cristiano," Freud said finally, "you've built a magnificent castle of self-belief. But castles have walls. What do you protect inside?" Ronaldo's gaze turned inward. "Maybe the fear that one day it all ends, that people stop shouting my name." Freud nodded slowly. And then Cristiano looked down, whispering, "Then I'd have to meet myself again." A silence followed, not awkward, but heavy with truth. Freud leaned back, pipe smoke curling around the air like thoughts taking shape. "The man who meets himself," Freud said, "is both terrified and free. Perhaps your next victory, Cristiano, will not be scored on grass, but within." The narrator's tone deepens. For the first time, the great Freud felt empathy for his subject, not as a scientist for a specimen, but as a man for another man chained by his own brilliance. The fire crackled once more. Freud glanced at his notes. "You mentioned Madrid, didn't you?" he said. "Tell me, when you left England, what did you expect to find there?" Cristiano smiled faintly, almost nostalgically. "Perfection, doctor. A kingdom. A place where greatness wasn't questioned. It was worshipped." Freud looked intrigued. "Ah, Madrid, the stage for gods. I see. So that's where our next conversation shall begin." The narrator closes the part softly, setting up the continuation. And so, their dialogue paused at the gates of Madrid, where ambition would meet destiny. In the next chapter, Freud would discover that even kings carry shadows. The scene opens under the Spanish sun. The narrator's voice flows like the introduction to an epic. Madrid, the city where applause becomes religion. And there, among marble statues and roaring crowds, walked a man who had turned admiration into empire. Freud, older and weary, arrived as an observer once more, not to analyze, but to understand. He found Cristiano in a vast, quiet training ground. The echo of distant cheers lingered like ghosts of victories past. Ronaldo stood alone, practicing free kicks long after the others had gone home. Precision, repetition, perfection, each movement a prayer to the god he'd become. Freud approached slowly, his cane tapping against the concrete. "Still chasing the invisible," he said softly. Cristiano turned, smiling. "Doctor, you found Madrid." Freud smiled back. "Indeed, I wish to see the temple of your triumph, and perhaps the cost of it." Ronaldo laughed. "You sound like a journalist now." No, Freud replied. They seek stories. I seek symbols. And you, my dear boy, are one. They sat in the stands as the sun began to fall. The golden light poured over the field, the same field that had witnessed miracles. Tell me, Freud said, what does glory feel like when you already have it? Cristiano looked toward the empty seats. Like a beautiful cage. You get everything you ever dreamed of, but you can't leave because the dream depends on you staying inside it. Freud nodded slowly. You have become both master and prisoner of your image. The child who wanted to be seen now cannot escape the gaze. That's true, Cristiano admitted. Some days, I wish I could play without cameras, without pressure. Just me and the ball again. Freud smiled faintly. The nostalgia of the successful, the desire to return to innocence, once the world crowns you guilty of greatness. Ronaldo chuckled. You make it sound poetic, doctor. It is, Freud replied. All human life is poetry written in conflict. They sat in silence for a moment. Two men on opposite ends of time, united by their understanding of ambition. Freud broke the quiet first. Tell me, Cristiano, when you score, when you lift your arms to the crowd, who do you see in your mind? Ronaldo looked up, eyes distant. My mother, my father, the boy from Madeira, who dreamed this before anyone believed. Freud nodded, emotion flickering beneath his calm exterior. Then despite the fame, despite the myths, you remain that boy, reaching out for love. Cristiano smiled softly. Maybe, but now when I reach out, millions reach back. Freud leaned forward, his voice low but kind. Then you have achieved what all my patients sought, unity between the self and the world. You've made your unconscious visible. Cristiano laughed lightly. So I'm cured, doctor? Cured. Freud smiled. No, my dear Cristiano, you are simply aware, and that is rarer than perfection. The narrator's tone deepens, cinematic and slow. The conversation drifted into the golden dusk. Freud, the old scientist, had come seeking the mechanics of ego, but found instead its art. And Ronaldo, the eternal competitor, discovered that even his confidence carried echoes of the fragile child who began it all. One last thing, Freud said as he rose to leave. When the cheering stops, and it will, what then? Cristiano's eyes met his. Then I'll keep playing. Maybe not on the field, but somewhere, because greatness, doctor, isn't what I do, it's what I am. Freud smiled, deeply moved. Then I envy you, Mr. Ronaldo. Most men spend their lives searching for who they are. You have already found him, and the world has met him too. The two men shook hands, a silent pact between genius and willpower. The narrator closes the scene as the camera pans across the empty stadium, echoing the faint sound of a distant crowd chanting Ronaldo. Ronaldo, and thus ended their final meeting. Freud returned to his studies, and Cristiano to his destiny. One dissected the mind, the other mastered it. Together, they proved that even in an age of science and fame, the human soul still hungers to be understood. Fade to black. Next episode teaser. But what happens when the mirror of greatness reflects another legend? Coming next, Freud Meets Messi, the quiet genius in the shadow of perfection.